Hey, what's going on, guys? Chris Dorsano here from Motivational Monday. Today I have with us Daniel Kwak from the Kwak Brothers. What we're going to do today is a little bit of interview of what it's like in the life of a real estate investor.
Real estate investor.
So Daniel's going to tell his story. He's how many units do you have right now?
I got 77.
77 units, a bunch of fix and flips, bunch of, what would you call them, overnight
Nightly rentals.
nightly rentals, and he's going to talk about that journey and how he does his day to day, and we're going to get in depth a little bit and what that journey's like. So
absolutely. Thanks. So 77 units. We have 7 fix and flips going on right now on the East Coast, and I recently just bought a single family house for Airbnb.
Cool.
So we're working, man.
So Daniel, what got you into real estate investing?
Yeah, so I don't know if a whole lot of people know, right? But my family grew up really poor. So obviously myself, my brother, and then my mom and dad. We grew up really poor, immigrants to this country, and that went all the way up to when I was about 20 years old. And I remember when I was 20, I had negative $187 in my bank account. I was eating out of a dumpster at Dunkin' Donuts. I had a maxed out credit card. And what made me specifically be engineered towards real estate investing was I knew I had big goals, right? I had big plans. Matter of fact, my dream in life is to own the Chicago Bulls, and it's to do a lot of great things for humanity.
Dream big, guys. Dream big.
Dream big, exactly. So obviously my dad's a pastor, and I'm coming from a Christian background, and I am a follower of Christ. And I never wanted my resources to get in the way of the purpose and the vision that God wants me to implement in this world. So being at 20 years old in that financial predicament, I knew I had nothing. You know what I mean? Like I had nothing, and and I know there's like the story in the Bible where the boy takes 7 fish and 5 loaves of bread or whatever, and Jesus feeds the 5,000 with it. But in this case, I had negative 3 fish and negative 5 loaves of bread. Like I owed things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what kind of sparked my desire to be an entrepreneur, not necessarily to be rich, but to make an impact. To dedicate resources towards these causes that matter, right? Visions that God wants me to really push, and of course, what makes the world go around? Resources, right? Whether that's people, money, or whatever that is. So I remember reading an article when I was 17 years old, and ever since I was 12, I was an entrepreneur. I would actually sell Yu-Gi-Oh cards and Pokemon cards to the kids in my neighborhood. And I remember I had a class when I was 17 years old, and it was basically a class that involved so it was a history class, and then basically it was like a March Madness debate of historical figures. I know, it's super lame, but it was lit. It was really lit. You know what I mean? Wow. Lit. But I got Thomas Jefferson. And my job was to persuade, right? And that's how the tournament kind of style worked, right? Like each person had one thing, right? One guy had the internet, another guy had George Washington, another guy had, and it was their job to persuade the class why your historical figures or event or whatever made more of an impact in American history than the person you're going up against.
They made it a challenge.
So, I think we had like 32 people in the class, which is perfect. You have brackets, right? 32 teams, you eventually got one winner. Mm-hmm. I had Thomas Jefferson, and I felt like I got dealt an unlucky hand because in the history class, we would talk about how Thomas Jefferson was notorious for, waking up late, showing drunk to meetings, and the only thing he did was the Louisiana Purchase, and also write, obviously the Declaration of Independence. But, at the same time, we talked about in class how he would rape slaves, and he would just do the most nastiest, most, unethical, immoral thing. So I feel like I got dealt with a bad hand. I won the whole thing. I won the whole thing, and I was able to persuade the whole class, like, hey, I was able to create, what Russell called epiphany bridges, right, and reassociations. Mm-hmm. And so when I was 17, I knew I had that very good skill. I had a good skill with people, and my history teacher was like, dude, you should get into, like, business. You should get into sales. You should get into some sort of thing.
Is that 12 years old?
No, this is me at 17.
17 years old.
So, yeah, so 12 years old is when I'm selling the cards, and then
Got it.
17 is when I'm in my history class. So Mr. Vasolo, if you're watching, shout out to you, right? You sparked the legend. So and fast forward and I read an article that the most millionaires are made in real estate. So I was like, okay, well, I have the skill for people. I want to get in business, and at that point it was, what industry do I get into? And I read this article and it was about real estate. So I was like, man, I know where I have to be. I know where I have to be. And, growing up, obviously we grew up in apartment buildings. My family was very poor. We couldn't really get a house until a certain age. And even when we did, we lived in like a parsonage, which is where like the pastor and his family lived. And I remember somebody said something to me at a young age, and he's like, well, people go to work every single day, but the guy who comes to collect rent only comes once a month. And I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, whoa. So I started learning. I started learning about, real estate investing. Fortunately, found a mentor who was willing to mentor me. And looking back, I wish I would have done a lot of things differently, which is why in part 2 of this video, we're actually going to talk about the specific things that I would do if I were to start. But of course, right now, just kind of sharing my story. That's how I started. That's how I got intrigued to real estate investing. And also, I give a lot of credit to my brother. My brother actually is the one that got me into entrepreneurship, and even started getting me interested in the business world in general. So,
wow. So, I mean, you had been impacted in this pretty early. So, were you researching into real estate at that young age then?
No.
So it was much later on in life that you actually got
much later. So it was one of those things where I kind of saw that article in passing, and I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. And it didn't like reoccur back until I was 20 years old.
It re-triggered later.
Yeah, it re-triggered later. And I remember being in that financial situation. I was like, man, what happened? You know what I mean? Like, I thought I was going to be able to achieve all these great things. And I thought I was, and yet here I am, bent over backwards in a dumpster looking for something to eat.
So, I mean, obviously you had this passion. It kind of triggered it. You moved forward into the point. You're starting your journey into this new point in your life where you want to start in real estate. Most millionaires are made in real estate.
Yeah.
So you're like, I need to get into this. Where do you start? Like, where do you even begin?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. That's a really good question. So, part 2 is going to dive really specifically into this. But in terms of where do I start? I think where you start is with where you are right now. And in terms of when I say where you are right now, I mean not where you are financially, not where you are physically. I mean, it kind of sounds really dumb. Like, where do you start? Where you're at right now. Right. It kind of seems like common sense.
One step forward, right?
Yeah, one step forward. But I have to say the biggest distance, right? Because when we're talking about starting something, when we're talking about starting, we kind of think about like a race, and everybody says life is a marathon. So, when people say, when do you start? We talk about it being a marathon, not a sprint, right? A great house is built brick by brick by brick, right? And so, where do you start? Well, I think the biggest distance that anybody is going to have to travel when they start something is the 6 inches between your ears. And when I say that, it's your brain, it's your mindset. So where do you start? I think you should start by getting into some personal development. Right, getting into some personal development, because I've seen the biggest thing between people who succeed in real estate and people who don't succeed in real estate is the people who succeed intentionally, they put personal development first. And in my case, and obviously in your case as well, our form of personal development comes through God. It comes through praying, comes through meditating, comes through having a relationship with Jesus Christ and following, the Holy Spirit. So for me, like I attribute my success to my relationship with God, because it really helped me anchor and also sustain my personal development. And since I had that, I knew like the knowledge and everything else was kind of just secondhand.
So when you found your faith that was guiding you.
Yeah.
And then you started educating yourself in self-help books. You started finding a mentor. So you're creating yourself with education. So were you taking education courses?
I was. So when I say mentor, I want people to be really careful. Really, really careful. Because, I'm sure you would agree that, let's take entrepreneurship for a second, because you're a great entrepreneur. If you took 10 random entrepreneurs, out of those 10, statistically speaking, and also on your own experience, how would you say out of 10 are legit entrepreneurs that people should follow?
Maybe one.
Maybe one. Right. Not so different in real estate investing.
Sure.
If I showed you 10 real estate investors, even if they're like successful and they have like 50 units, 100 units, right? It doesn't mean you should follow them. Now, do they have great things to share? Yeah, absolutely. Because otherwise they wouldn't be where they're at. They wouldn't be, what the world defines as success had they not gone through some stuff. But I also believe that a lot of people can get hurt. If they follow a mentor, they'll take you to a certain level. But following kind of that same ideology, you might crash and burn because that's where they're headed as well. So I'd say in terms of finding the right mentor, like it's so key. And a lot of people don't know how to recognize that. That's why I say do the personal development first. And when I say first, I mean do it first chronologically and then keep it first for the rest of your life. So in my case, and also in your case, I focus on my relationship with God first, even today, even with, all the deals I'm doing across the country, even when I'm mentoring hundreds and thousands of people, I still keep God first. Because if that's gone, then, I can point out 9 out of 10 people who have had, they had 1,000 units and then they crashed and burned, because they weren't, centered.
They weren't in sync.
They weren't in sync,
Right.
And so I would say look for a mentor who has good character, but at the same time is intentional about mentoring you.
And I think that's a good point for the mentor part because a lot of people I don't think realize what it is to find a good quality in a mentor and a coach. I feel like there's a big difference in between a coach and a mentor. Like a coach is someone who keeps you accountable, makes sure you're taking care of your goals, calls you once a week, is keeping you on top of your game. Where a mentor, I think, is more of the lines of, they've done what I want to do, and then you're learning directly how they did it, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's what you do with your students, right?
Yeah. And a large part of what I tell them is like, listen, somebody may be a mentor, and then once you get to their level, you may have to find new mentors. You never want to plateau and stay at one level, and that's something that I've been experiencing for the last 6 to 12 months, is finding new mentors who can take me to the next level, So I'm at, multi-millions in terms of what I control in real estate. All right, well, how can I find somebody who controls 9 figures in real estate? Somebody who operates, a minimum $100 million real estate fund that I can be a part of? Because that's probably, after many months of prayer and years of preparation, I would say that's probably my next step in my career, which is starting a large real estate fund. So, kind of going back to the mentor, knowing their characteristics, and a lot of people they just take what they can get. It's a lot like dating. If you just dated somebody who just liked you, and you just saw that as like, well, that's an option, or I'm gonna do it just because they like me, you're gonna have a horrible love life. You're gonna end up dating like 12 people, and then not being intentional about finding somebody who you truly, truly love and care for. So, I would say be intentional about what you're looking for in a mentor. And I would ask, a lot of my audience, a lot of your audience, a lot of everybody's audience, everybody says find a mentor. Have they ever sat down and written, what do I look for in a mentor? What's my perfect mentor? I would challenge people to be intentional about what they look for, in a mentor. We do it in a spouse.
Yeah.
Maybe
interview them, right?
Yeah, even then. Take them out to lunch and I say, hey, listen, I'm looking to, learn some things in real estate. I want to get to know something about you. You're not like qualified. You're not like, are you good enough for me? No, that's not. You still want to be humble.
Sure.
But there's nothing wrong with asking a potential mentor, right? And it's just that even sounds funny.
It is interesting the way the dynamic you look at it, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's the same in all areas, for business, for life, for relationships.
Exactly.
They're all one of the same.
Yep.
So when you were looking for your mentor, what were the things that you did to find them?
Yeah, so I looked at I shadowed a lot of people in the start. So I shadowed a guy named Randy, who was really good at fix and flip. I shadowed a guy named Ed, who's been in the industry for a long time. I shadowed a bunch of guys.
And I don't think people understand what it means to shadow, right? So like we went out just recently,
Yeah.
right? And like to shadow someone is to go out and see exactly what they're doing day for day. Like every single thing that you're doing, I'm seeing it happen in action, the behind the scenes.
Right.
Not just what we show on YouTube.
Exactly.
But like behind the scenes of what's happening, what are the problems, things you need to resolve. Like you don't get that if you're not shadowing someone enough.
Exactly, in
Like,
real life.
How many times would you say it would take someone to shadow you to actually understand like a whole scope of what's going on?
Oh, geez. I mean, for me, probably, if somebody were to shadow me, probably about 6 months to a year to really get it.
And I would imagine
like,
doing that for
really
like 3
get
or
it.
4 people.
Yeah. So I was doing that for, I shadowed a lot of people, and I was just really paying attention to, okay, like what are their flaws? What are their things that they're good at? You know, and once I found out what they were good at, I would really pay attention to how well they play to their strengths. But when I looked at some of their flaws, I kind of said, all right, what are some things that I need to improve? That I need to get better at. And I always say shadow multiple people, because then, one guy's weakness is another guy's strengths, and you kind of take the good
Balance it out.
from everyone.
Sure.
It really should be kind of like a buffet. You should treat your plate. Like your brain is literally a plate. It's like a plate of food. Like your brain isn't capable of putting every single piece of food into your plate.
Well, if you put all the ingredients in one, it doesn't taste good, right?
Exactly,
It's a little
right?
bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah.
It's making the gourmet meal. So.
Right, and a lot of times kind of just even following the metaphorical path of food, like you can't just get food you like. Sometimes you have to get food that's healthy for you. And a lot of times, like even when I shadowed my mentors, there are some things where I'm like, ooh, man, like I don't know if I'm willing to do that. Not that it had anything to do with ethics or morals or principles, but it's like it just took me out of my comfort zone. Like I'm naturally, I would say like 49% extrovert and 51% introvert. So for me,
So
like
good
the
balance.
idea of like eviction, like going through an eviction, that made me really uncomfortable. Like kicking somebody out. Like I was like, oh my gosh, that's so terrible. But at the same time, I even had a conversation with my pastor, and he's like, well, the Bible teaches justice. You know what I mean? Like the Bible teaches jurisdiction. Like if they're, in the unit and they're not paying rent, well, that's stealing. They're stealing something of yours,
Right.
They're stealing kind of, shelter, and a lot of times people get evicted because, they have gambling issues, because they have drug problems, and at that point, is it my responsibility that their life is like that? No, absolutely not.
Yeah, so let's step back a little bit. Because,
Yeah.
I want to get the full view for someone who's just getting into this. And I mean, you did all this shadow work, you did all this studying, you had all this self-help when you were, a kid, you knew you wanted to get into this. So how long did it take once you picked up your first, you're shadowing in your first real estate book to actually buy your first property?
Yeah, so a lot of people rush into getting their first deal. And it's a lot like, again, I'm going to use dating as an example.
Sure.
When you get into high school, a lot of people just rush into relationships just because they want to be in one, right? Like I think the statistic is 98%, like 98 to 99% of relationships in high school don't last. You know what I mean? Like they end up being together. Like only 1%. Like even in my high school, like I don't think anybody who dated in high school are like together even today.
You hear that, Dan Dorsano?
That's so funny.
You're the 1%.
Yeah. No, but seriously though. So a lot of people rush into it, and kind of like when you're in a dating relationship and you move on to the next one, whether people like it or not, you kind of bring that baggage from the previous relationship. You do, whether people want to admit it or not. That's just the way it is. I feel like in real estate, where instead of investing in yourself and rushing into a relationship, which really is the right thing to do. When you're young, when you're 14, 15, 16 years old, and I would say even college, I would say spend that time investing in yourself. And then once you invest in yourself, now you're the right person for who you want to end up with.
Sure.
And you just find somebody else who's investing in themselves. So it's not 50-50, it's 100-100. Right, in a relationship. Same thing in real estate investing. Don't rush into a deal. Rather focus on investing in yourself. So ever since I started real estate investing, it was 2.5 years before I even did my first deal. 2.5 years.
And that was you already studying self-help. You already growing yourself.
Exactly.
That's just the real estate courses.
That's just the real estate knowledge part.
Right.
So I would say my personal development really started kicking off when I was 18. When I was 18 years old. And then from 18 to 20, got really hardcore into personal development, building my relationship with Christ. And then at 20, it was another 2.5 years until I was 22 and a half that I even did my first transaction. So you're talking about 4.5 years of preparation for doing your first deal.
Sure.
But a lot of those years, of studying is really starting to pay off now.
Awesome. So all that studying, your first property, was it profitable? Was that first property?
It was yes and no. You know what I mean? So there were some hiccups. Like I always tell people, you're gonna learn more
From your
lessons from your first deal than a lot of other deals combined. So I'd say the same thing for me. Like the first deal that my brother and I did, we learned more from that deal than all my other ones. Like same thing, like my first apartment complex, I learned more lessons from that apartment complex and more, mistakes, experiences, whatever you want to say, than all the other apartment complexes that I'd done since then.
Interesting. So would you say that every property you've had, that was still the most experience you've ever received from? Was that first one?
Yeah, I would say so, because it
Okay.
it really kind of, it really kind of
Was it
opened my
eye-opener? Did you
my
have
eyes.
a mentor helping you buy that first property?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. So my mentor actually helped me negotiate my first property, and kind of watching multiple mentors negotiate deals. Like I probably watched between all my different mentors, I probably watched in live. Like I'm talking not through video, but like
person.
actually in person, sitting down, watching them. I'm like shaking the seller's hand, right? Meeting him and seeing how the conversation. I probably watched over at least 100 times. 100 times of watching my mentor, whether it's a fix and flip, whether it's a buy and hold, multifamily, whatever it is, negotiate a deal before I even negotiated one myself.
Awesome. So, I mean, you guys heard it here. I mean, you have to do your research. You have to find a mentor. You have to do your due diligence,
Yeah.
as they say in real estate, right? You're checking off all the boxes, and you can still make mistakes on your first property.
It's a no. I mean, you're gonna make mistakes, And I had a mentor that I sat down with for breakfast one time. His name is Jim, and he actually recently, about 2 years ago, sold one of his companies, just one of his companies for $192 million. So he's a guy who actually starts businesses and he sells them, 5, 6, 7 years later. He sold another business before that for like $92, $93 million. So, I mean, this guy is legit. And he told me a phrase, a statement that kind of just stuck in my head. And he's like, dude, whether you're in real estate, whatever, if you're in business, like, you're going to have to get kicked in the balls. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like an inappropriate statement, but like, to his point,
it's quoted from him to his point that you're gonna get hurt.
yeah, you're
and you have to
gonna
learn from
get
it.
hurt. And to his point, like he told me, is like, I know it's like kind of vulgar language, but unless it's something that sticks out, you won't remember it. So I was like, oh, and he was right. Like, because it was so funny and I laughed, but at the same time it stood out, because he could have just said, you're gonna get hurt. Then I would have kind of just been like, oh, okay, well, that's a no-brainer. But because he said, dude, you're gonna have to get kicked in the balls a couple of times, and like he was a really funny guy, I mean, he was just like, just picture a little midget, with a pointy-toed shoe just right there, and I just like busted out laughing because I couldn't control myself. But to his point, it helped me remember, and it really kind of made me think, it really like dove in and made me think. So to kind of a lot of the viewers that are listening, my audience, your audience, if you want to avoid mistakes in real estate, right, you can't. But if you want to do your best, to avoid as many mistakes as you possibly can, right, I say the more time you invest into learning the real estate game, learning yourself, and learning your team, those three things, if you spend time learning yourself, your self-awareness, your strengths and weaknesses, and acting on it, learning your team, the people around you, and you're intentional about surrounding yourself with good-hearted, ethical people. So in my case, I try and surround myself with, fellow Christ-following individuals.
Sure.
And if you know your real estate game, right, the more time you invest into those three things, the less mistakes you're going to have. Kind of like how Michael Jordan says, right? Like, the more time you spend in practice, the less stressful the game is.
Sure.
Yeah,
that's great. I mean, so if people want to check out some of your programs or get coaching from you, where should they go?
Yeah, so they should go to learn.thekwakbrothers.com. Also subscribe, of course, to the Kwak Brothers YouTube channel.
Sure.
And also subscribe to his channel too.
I guess.
Yeah.
Chris Dorsano, Motivational Monday.